The 4-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers are looking to bounce back this week after an ugly overtime loss to the Super Bowl champions on Monday Night Football. The San Francisco 49ers at 4-4 come into this matchup off of their bye week after beating the Dallas Cowboys. Both of these teams are in desperate need of a win here to stay relevant in the NFC playoff race. We have got Andrew Fillipponi from FanDuel Radio and more coming up next on the Cannon Fire Podcast.
I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked up. That's picked off, and who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. That's 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 29. He's gone. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew. Today on the game preview show, we're going to take a look at Week 10's matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the San Francisco 49ers. The Buccaneers at 4-5, fresh off an overtime loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we'll have the other Super Bowl team from last year on their plates this week as they try and fight towards the bye week. This is their last game before the bye week, trying to get to 5-5. I think a 5-5 record, albeit underwhelming to some, is a lot different than 4-6 if they were to come into this one and drop this game. It means a lot in the NFC wildcard chase. Both of these teams are looking to compete within the NFC playoffs. And San Francisco, they are a complete team. They have shown that they are a good team, but they aren't necessarily a consistent team so far in 2024, have not won back-to-back games just yet. So coming off of a victory and hopefully feeling refreshed after their bye week, they are looking to bring it to the Buccaneers on the road in Raymond James Stadium. Before we dive into today's conversation with Andrew Fillipponi and FanDuel Radio, got some Buccaneer news for you. On the injury front, Todd Bowles confirmed today that Mike Evans is the only player ruled out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a positive update on Mike Evans, he was back at the practice facility this week on the field, not in an official capacity, but working out on the sideline with trainers, which you love to see. I mean, any progress for Mike is going to be good progress. And the initial report was that he was expected to be back after the bye week. This is going to be a good window for the Buccaneers to hopefully get the rest of their guys healthy, because Mike Evans being the only one 100% ruled out is a good sign. Now, you still got a couple of guys we're waiting on their status from the injured reserve. Jamel Dean, Servassier Dennis, his season is done. But Jamel Dean could be back in play on the other side of the bye week. Just have to wait and see how that plays out. But Jalen McMillan will be back in the lineup this week after missing last week's game with a hamstring injury. And Greg Gaines, the big defensive lineman, is questionable, should be a game-time decision, but expecting him to give it a go. You know, Todd Bowles as head coach, I think, is another one of the top storylines headed into this game, because the inefficiencies on the defensive side of the ball point to Todd Bowles. We've talked time and time again about the players who are available, the guys who are out there being able to execute, but this defense just getting worse and not really having an answer. A lot of that points to Todd Bowles. It points to a lack of adjustments. It points to a scheme being exposed week in and week out. Miscommunication is one of the biggest problems as well among guys who have been in this system before, have played and succeeded in this system before. So a lot of those guys going to be looking to get back on the right track, because let's face it, folks, if down the stretch of this season, the Buccaneers have to win an ass ton of games, which as of right now, they do have to win an ass ton of games. But down the stretch here, if they try and do that and the defense is continually holding them back, I think the conversation about Todd Bowles' job is going to be much louder than it is now. And it's already very loud. There's already plenty of people among the listener base, the fan base, even people who aren't fans of the Bucs, apparently, who want Todd Bowles gone from his head coaching spot. I still think there is too much time left in the season for me to personally have a definitive answer on Todd Bowles. But I think the clock is ticking. I said earlier this week, I'm running out of patience with Todd Bowles, and that is a true statement. His matchup this week isn't favorable. Kyle Shanahan has absolutely owned him since he has come to Tampa Bay. The last couple of matchups with the San Francisco 49ers have not been kind to the Buccaneers. We remember Brock Purdy's first career start absolutely blanking Tom Brady and the Bucs, and it has not gotten better since then. It was 13-7 halftime of that game. I think it was week 11 of the 2023 season, but the Buccaneers just in the second half could not hang on. And luckily for the 49ers this week, Christian McCaffrey is back in the fold. So they have a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball that I think, have a track record of doing well against a Todd Bowles defense. Christian McCaffrey obviously speaks for himself, but George Kittle at the tight end position is not a great matchup for Tampa Bay. As good as Cade Otton has been, the Bucs have been that bad at defending the middle of the field, specifically the tight end position. So I think there's a lot of matchups this week that do not favor Todd Bowles, and he is certainly going to have to bring his A game here if he wants to prove that he should continue coaching this team, because he's in the hot seat for a lot of fans right now. On the defensive side of the ball, I think there are guys getting back into the lineup that are going to help this team. The Bucs missed out on Mike Edwards this week. He ended up on the Tennessee Titans, but he had requested a trade from Buffalo. He wasn't getting much playing time. I think he went to Tennessee not because he had a better chance to win, but because he had a better chance to play and put film out there and maybe earn himself another contract. I was hoping the Bucs were going to make a move on Mike Edwards, but they do not. But I do think the guys that are back in this lineup, Tyke Smith in particular here, the Buccaneers benefit from ball hawks who can create takeaways, who can force turnovers. The pass rush has really stepped up. They had a decent game against Kansas City on Monday night. They're going to have to do it again this week. Brock Purdy isn't necessarily as mobile as some of the other guys the Bucs have faced so far this year, but he can certainly make them pay in the pocket if they give him time, which they have done for a lot of these quarterbacks so far this year. But, if your pass rush can't get there, you need guys who can force takeaways. They're going to be counting on their ball hawks this week. The guys who can turn the ball over, the guys who can create fumbles, who can punch the football out. Tyke Smith doing a really good job of that in his rookie season. Had a forced fumble against the Chiefs on Monday night. Going to be looking for him. And he's a rookie that we're leaning on here. But these are guys the Buccaneers need to lean on because the coverage just isn't working. If you're not going to have an answer for some of these offenses, you need to start taking the ball away. I think one of the biggest reasons the Bucs were able to stay competitive in that game against Kansas City was the turnover battle. They won the turnover battle +1 in that football game. Kansas City, I know their offense has floundered a little bit this season. They aren't as explosive as they have been, but those things matter when you're playing a team that finds ways to win football games. And yeah, San Francisco is not at that level this year. They have a more potent offense, but they have lost more games, which is an odd combination there. But they can certainly do some damage. So yeah, this is a defense that has to rely on taking the football away at this point, because again, the lack of adjustments from Todd Bowles, I don't know how much I trust him this week, but they have averaged 27 points per game allowed, and they have given up 34 points per game in their last 3. They've lost their last 3 straight, and they've given up 30 plus. They lost 4 of their last 5, and they've given up 30 or more in all of those football games. So if you have a defense that can't stop them, take the ball away. The Buccaneers taking care of the football, but taking advantage of any takeaways as well are going to go a long way here. I think for Todd Bowles, the in-game adjustments as well are going to be something to keep an eye on. Kyle Shanahan, if he starts hot, if he comes out here in the first quarter, in the first half, and the Bucs are trailing, what is this team going to look like in the second half? They couldn't keep up last year. They were only behind 6 points, 13-7, but it was 2 different ball games last year. They absolutely blanked the Bucs in the second half of that game in 2023. So can he adjust in the middle of a game against a coach who has outcoached him? There's no other way to put it. A guy who has outcoached them the last several times these teams have met. I think the in-game adjustments are going to go a long way as well. Todd Bowles, he's going to be tested. I think applying more pressure on the quarterback this week, again, we already talked about the efficiencies, or I guess the improvement on the defensive line. They have to do it again this week. And I'm not even just talking about the guys who had multiple sacks last week on the interior, Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey both having big days against the Chiefs. I'm talking about Chris Braswell, who did show up at times against the Chiefs. But I'm looking at Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Yaya Diaby, Anthony Nelson, if he can get involved. I mean, some of these younger guys getting involved in the edge rusher rotation as well, going to be looking at them. But These are the guys who have to continually show up, whether it's getting a hand on the football or getting a hand on the quarterback. These are things that go a long way in disrupting the play, making Brock Purdy hang on to the football, look for that second, third, fourth read. Maybe you get a coverage sack, maybe you get a turnover, but that's going to win you the football game if you have an offense that can take care of the football. Speaking of the offense and taking care of the football, have to talk about the quarterback who will be ready to go despite popping up on the injury report with a foot injury. Baker Mayfield, number 6. So far this season, an NFL leading 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 71.4% completion percentage, averaging 265 pass yards per game, 7.6 yards per attempt, and a 105.6 passer rating for the QB1. Baker played a good game against Kansas City on Monday night. Given everything that he had against him, given the situation that he found himself in, unfortunately, he didn't see the football in overtime. And he knew as soon as the coin toss was lost for Tampa Bay, he knew that they probably were not going to see the football. You could tell by his body language. And it's disappointing because I think going for 2 solves that problem. But I think if the offense for Tampa Bay sees the field in overtime, they I don't want to say they probably win that game, but they obviously have a much better chance of winning that game, and that is because of Baker Mayfield. It is hard to not believe in the Bucs right now because of Baker Mayfield. Buck Wild called in after that show, or after that game, on the post-game show, and he commended Baker Mayfield for running head first into yardage. I mean, literally running his ass off out there, putting his body on the line on what was the game-tying touchdown drive. You know, he's just got to prove he can do it week in and week out. Took care of the football last week. He's got to do that again. He's got to show that he can bounce back from that rough stretch that a lot of people are going to continue to hold over his head. 7 interceptions in 3 weeks. It's impressively bad. Now, the tic-tac in some of those interceptions is another conversation, but he's got to be better, right? There's no way around it. He's got to be better at taking care of the football, and I think he can be. Aside from that rough stretch, I legitimately do think Baker Mayfield has been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They certainly are getting their money's worth when you look at what they're paying him. I think he is ranked 19th as far as quarterback salary goes in the NFL. There's a lot more guys who are starting playing worse and getting paid much more than Baker Mayfield is this week. So I think a lot of the weapons who have stepped up in past weeks, Cade Otton is one of those guys who has done a great job in helping Baker take care of the football. He's been a weapon on this offense. And I think this week, you know, San Francisco has got a pretty good defense, but until a team can show me that they can stop number 88, I expect him to be the leading receiver. 20 targets in the last 3 games for Cade Otton. I think that trend continues this week. But Liam Coen certainly has his hands full. Jalen McMillan back in the fold is going to be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to watch. I think the Bucs are going to continue to lean on some of the veterans that have stepped up. I know we just talked about Cade Otton, but Sterling Shepard, I know he's kind of been on and off the injury report, but he stepped up big time late in the game last week against Kansas City. Maybe Jalen McMillan makes that big play people have been waiting for. He is finally healthy, back in the lineup after missing some action. So going to be looking at those guys, Trey Palmer as well, and then maybe Sean Tucker. I hope that Sean Tucker can find some reps this week. Todd Bowles said last week, headed into that Chiefs game, that he was going to give Sean Tucker some carries, and it didn't work out that way. So we'll see if Todd Bowles wants to lie about that for another week in a row, but fingers crossed we can see number 44 and the rest of these running backs do some damage for this Buccaneers offense. The run game, you know, we've been talking about Baker Mayfield, haven't even talked about the run game, but the Bucs between Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker, who has been the odd man out. Bucky Irving with a lingering toe injury is still productive, and Rashad White is definitely still productive in the pass game, doing a really good job on the blitz pickup. The Bucs seem to like him there. So, unfortunately, until we see more number 44, I think Rashad White and Bucky Irving are going to be the 1-2 punch headed forward for this Buccaneers running back room. They're going to be looking for some success this week, and San Francisco has got a pretty stout run defense, so that matchup is going to be interesting to watch. Today on the show, we are talking with Andrew Fillipponi of FanDuel Radio. We preview Week 10 and some of the top storylines, player props, and more headed into that game. Before we send you over, I got to give you my game pick. It's not a game preview if I don't give you my game pick for the week, right? Last week, I picked the Bucs to lose, and it didn't necessarily feel right. I know it was the right pick, but I don't ever like being right about a loss. So I think the Bucs know what's at stake this week. I don't want to say it's a favorable matchup because they have to prove it to me, right? Until I believe this offense can be effective for 4 quarters against the 49ers, I have to see it. They showed up last week against Kansas City. Like, they played in that game and made it competitive, took it to overtime. The offense didn't see the field, but they could have won that game if they did. I do think it is low scoring, but the fact that San Francisco has not found consistency yet helps the Bucs in this matchup. They are coming off of a win. They are coming off of a bye week, so everything says they should be refreshed and ready to go. I think the Buccaneers put that to bed somehow. They come out here hot. They take advantage of the game. I got the Buccaneers taking this one with a final score of 21-18. It is an ugly game, but it's a game that the Buccaneers find a way to win. They improve their record to 5-5, head into the bye week feeling good, and the push for the playoffs begins on the other side of that bye week. They know what's at stake, and I think the playoff push is going to have to start this week. So that is my pick for Week 10, Bucs versus Niners. Both teams looking for some ground here in the NFC playoff push. The Buccaneers, with 1 game left before the bye week, looking to set the tone, and I think they do just that. Here we have got Andrew Fillipponi of FanDuel Radio. We are going to break it down and get out of here. We'll talk to you on the other side of this one.
Okay, so the 49ers are in Tampa Bay today, 2 4-win teams. The Bucs are a 6.5-point underdog with the 49ers expecting to get Christian McCaffrey back for this game. Tampa Bay coming off the emotionally draining loss to the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. They came very close to knocking off Kansas City and handing them their first defeat of the season. Rhett Matthew, when we want to talk to somebody on the Buccaneers, we go straight to Rhett. That's where this game is today down in Tampa. Buccaneers trying to get back to 500 and keep themselves in the NFC South race. Rhett, as time has gone by here and the days have gone by since that game to Kansas City, are fans there still unhappy about the decision to not go for the 2-point conversion at the end of regulation?
Yeah, I definitely think it comes down to who you ask, but most people are scratching their heads as to why the Bucs weren't more aggressive there. The fact of the matter is you had the back-to-back Super Bowl champs against the ropes on prime time, and this is a Bucs team that has already lost on prime time in overtime where their offense didn't see the football field. So the last thing they wanted to do was give Pat Mahomes a chance to pull that game out, and unfortunately that's exactly what happened there. So most people would say they should have gotten aggressive there, but a lot of people understand why they didn't. But I still think it is going to be one of those things at the end of the year people are going to argue about probably until the end of time at this point.
Yeah. Rhett, how about the positives that the Buccaneers can take away from that Chiefs loss, even though it was a loss, that carry over to the game against San Francisco later on today?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First off, the developments on the defensive side of the ball. I know there were a couple of things they did not do well. Obviously lost the game in overtime, kind of crumbled there. Tight ends had a big day. Travis Kelce had a big day. But the pressure from the defensive line was probably the most consistent we have seen all season. These last couple of weeks, with players and injuries on the defensive side of the ball, Todd Bowles has kind of fine-tuned his approach to the blitz altogether, how he is sending these guys after the quarterback, and he has put a lot more trust in his 4-down linemen. Kalijah Kancey, Vita Vea, both of those guys against Kansas City had multiple sacks on the evening, and those are just your interior defensive linemen. Vita Vea leads the Buccaneers with 5 sacks this year, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but again, when you talk about the injuries they faced, you're kind of looking for production wherever they can get it at this point. So that's the thing that they like, and then I think the overall fight of this team, the grit, the ability for this offense to, at least put themselves in a position to tie this game up. There were plenty of times where, they were put in a position where they'd have to capitalize on their own mistake, and they end up winning the turnover battle. They take care of the football. The offense was consistent, and inconsistencies on the defense, but they stepped up at times. I think the grit that this team showed, the fight, is a big deal for a lot of people down here. It's a team that is probably going to win some games down the stretch, but depending on how Sunday goes against the Niners, it's going to be a very high-pressure situation, just like it was at the tail end of 2023 when they had to win a bunch of games down the stretch and go 5-1 just to make it to the postseason. So we'll see how it shakes out, but a lot of people like the way that they played for the most part against Kansas City, because that was a game not a lot of people had them staying competitive in.
Rhett Matthew with us here, and for another Sunday, it's a team that was in last year's Super Bowl for the Bucs. San Francisco comes to town, and the Niners on the road are a 6.5-point favorite coming off their bye. They're rested. The Bucs are not. Short week for them, having lost in Kansas City Monday night. And Christian McCaffrey is expected to play in this game and make his 2024 NFL debut. Rhett, you mentioned the play of the defensive line against Kansas City in the pass rush. How do you feel about the Buccaneers' ability to make sure that Christian McCaffrey isn't the reason why the 49ers come to Tampa Bay today and win this game?
I don't love it. I think the Bucs could do a decent job of shutting down Christian McCaffrey, but when you look at the other weapons the 49ers have on offense, I know they're hurt in some places, but George Kittle is a guy who can make problems for Tampa Bay. The tight end position in particular has really been something that they have struggled with these last couple of weeks. So I think if the communication on the defensive side of the ball for Tampa Bay is there, they can try to limit McCaffrey. He's one of those players that, depending on how healthy he is, like, you can really only limit him because he's still going to make plays. He's just that damn good, and he's been that damn good against the Buccaneers in the past. Kyle Shanahan is a guy who has owned Todd Bowles. He really knows how to draw his guys up successfully against this scheme, and more and more teams are having success against this Todd Bowles scheme so far this season. So again, it's a tough matchup for Tampa Bay, and I'm really hoping that these adjustments Todd Bowles is making are going to pay off. They've got a pretty tough challenge, and he's going to have something for Shanahan early, or otherwise this one could get out of hand.
Rhett Matthew with us here. He is in Tampa Bay, where later on today it's the Bucs and 49ers. We got a 6.5-point line in this game. Tampa Bay trying to avoid another loss to a great team. And when we talk Bucs, we bring Rhett on. This is the best game in the early window, at least one of the best ones, and we're getting you ready for it here on FanDuel's More Ways to Win Radio this morning. Baker Mayfield leads the NFL in touchdown passes going into Week 10, second in passing yards. His passing yards prop today is 245 yards, Rhett. Even during this stretch of uneven play for the Buccaneers, what is your take on what Baker Mayfield is doing this season?
Yeah, I think Baker's playing some of the best football we have seen throughout his career. Had a tough stretch the last couple of weeks. I think there was that stretch where he had 3 interceptions over 3 games, or 7 interceptions over 3 games. Excuse me, that's far less impressive. 7 interceptions in 3 games. A couple of them were tic-tac, but I'd say for the most part, he is playing really, really well. There were a lot of questions floating around Liam Coen's offense and what that's going to look like in Tampa Bay, how things are going to translate compared to Dave Canales. And, I'd argue Liam Coen has done a much better job with Baker Mayfield than Canales had done up until this point of the season last year. So I think for Baker, the confidence just has to continue. He has to show that he can consistently play at the high level he has been. You can't let the yips creep back in. Every now and again, he does try to play hero ball, and that's when the turnovers start to happen as well. But if he can take care of the football 3, 4, 5, 6 games in a row and just continue the high level of play, I think he's definitely playing like, dare I say it, I don't think I'll regret this, but by the end of the year, he might be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks in the NFL this year, though, so it's tough to say exactly where he ranks, but regardless, he's been playing damn well in this offense.
I like him to go over that number today of 245. How about you?
I don't know. That's a tough number. I feel like I say that all the time. I know it's kind of a cop-out. These guys know what they're doing when they pick the lines every single week, but I think this matchup has been a struggle for the Bucs in the past. I'm curious to see Liam Coen try his hand because Byron Leftwich could never figure out the Niners. Dave Canales certainly couldn't figure out the Niners. We'll see if Liam Coen can do it, but I'm going to go under. I don't think he gets quite that much. I do think he gets a couple of touchdowns, though.
Cade Otton's receiving yard prop is 58 yards in this game. Do you expect him to be Baker Mayfield's number one target?
Yeah, I like the over on that a lot. It's 20 targets in the last 3 games for big number 88. He's proven to be one of those do-it-all tight ends for the Bucs, and they desperately need a guy like that on offense right now. So I think that trend continues. Until a team can stop him, they're going to keep feeding Cade Otton the football.
When are we going to see Mike Evans again?
Hopefully after the bye week. I think that's what the initial report was when they said he was going to be missing some time, expecting him after the bye week. But Bucs fans did get some good news this week. He was back out on the practice field, not practicing in an official capacity, but he's out there working with trainers, which is the most involved he has been since that injury. So he's showing up on the practice field in the session that is open to the media, and that's giving people a lot of hope. It's not going to be this week. I don't know if it's coming out of the bye week. I don't know how big of a hurry they are in because they do have some favorable matchups down the stretch there. But I'd say the longest we'd have to wait to see Mike Evans is probably 3 weeks at this point.
Rhett Matthew in Tampa, where today we have the 49ers and Bucs, and San Francisco's a 6.5-point favorite there as they look to get back on track with Christian McCaffrey at running back. The Bucs have lost 3 in a row, but they've lost to some pretty good teams here during that stretch. And as Rhett has pointed out, last year they were 4-7, and they rallied to make the playoffs and win another NFC South for the 3rd straight year and win a playoff game. What's going to be the running back duties today, Rhett? How do you anticipate Liam Coen breaking up the running back snaps and carries in this game?
You know, it's interesting because the Bucs now find themselves with 3 capable running backs, and I wanted to talk mostly about Sean Tucker. I like the guy. He was the NFC Offensive Player of the Week when the Buccaneers hung 51 points on the Saints, and we have not seen him since. I think he has played a collective 11 or 12 snaps in this offense since that game.
Man.
Todd Bowles said headed into that Monday night game against Kansas City that Sean Tucker was going to get a fair shake, and that was not the case. So I genuinely don't know. I know for sure it's going to be a heavy dose of Rachaad White and Bucky Irving. Maybe they try to target those guys early on in the game like they did a couple of weeks ago against Atlanta. Those first 20 of 25 offensive plays the Bucs ran targeted the running backs. So maybe that's the case again this week. Bucky Irving kind of dealing with a season-long toe injury, but it didn't seem to bother him much last week. I think Rachaad White continuing to stay healthy and stay involved in this lineup. He is a factor for this Buccaneers football team. I know he was the odd man out for a little while Sean Tucker was making all that noise, but the Bucs coaching staff has shown to really like Rachaad White. They like his blitz pickup ability as well and his talents in the pass-catching game. So I would say, Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, until we see them step up and give Sean Tucker more carries. It's a shame because as talented as Sean Tucker is, I just don't think this coaching staff wants to make it a thing.
Rhett, the total in the game is 50.5. It's on the high side. Does it feel like an over or an under to you?
It feels like an under. Again, I don't know what a Liam Coen offense looks like against San Francisco, but I mean, as far as offensive coordinators go, the Bucs are 0-2 in these last couple of games against the San Francisco 49ers. Canales couldn't figure it out. Leftwich couldn't figure it out. I'd argue at this point that Liam Coen has the Buccaneers in a much better position than either of those offensive coordinators did. Byron Leftwich has the Super Bowl team, but, what he did yesterday doesn't matter. So I think Liam Coen could do it, but I do not expect a lot of points. I think historically Kyle Shanahan against Todd Bowles' defense, it's just been a tough matchup. So I don't think they go over. I'm going to say under here.
It's the highest total in the NFL today. Last one for you here, Rhett. The line is 6.5. Do you think the Buccaneers keep it within a touchdown against the 49ers today?
Yes. My heart says yes. My heart says it's a 3-point game. My brain says it might be a 10-point game. Again, I think there's a lot of factors that go into how the Bucs decide to play this game. If they come out aggressive, if they can set the tone on offense and control the pace of the game, I think they can keep it close. But the matchup that they've had with San Francisco before, they just don't have an answer. And I don't know how much I really trust Todd Bowles this week. So that's what it comes down to. But I think this could potentially get out of hand. And I know that Bucs fans might not like hearing that, but
so do I.
I need them to prove me otherwise. If if I don't want to think this headed into the next time they play the Niners, then they have to show up on Sunday. And I think they can do it, but they got to prove it to me.
Rhett Matthew from down in Tampa Bay. No one covers the Bucs like him. We're always happy to have him on FanDuel's More Ways to Win Radio. Rhett, thanks for popping on with us again. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Back with more right after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's game preview edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, watching live with us here on YouTube with the premiere feature, or listening after the fact on any one of our podcast outlets. We certainly appreciate your support. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Bless Pace Go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. We will be live, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast, Sunday after the game. We've got a special guest to help us break things down from the San Francisco point of view. Win, lose, or draw, we will be there live, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. Hope to see you there. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for this one. We will talk to you Sunday live after the game. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.